Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook, a podcast for entrepreneurs in the business of sports. Your hosts, Dave Kozak and Steve Cook, are business owners, successful entrepreneurs, sports enthusiasts, avid readers, and longtime friends. For years, they've read every business book on the market and built successful companies with what they've learned. This podcast will give you the critical takeaways in just 15 minutes a week. It's a quick and easy playbook for building a winning sports business. And now, here are your hosts, Dave and Steve.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Paradigm Playbooks podcast. Dave Kozak alongside my co-host, Mr. Steve Cook. Steve, good day today?
Excellent day today. This is exciting. This is a great topic, a touchy topic maybe, but a good one.
Definitely a touchy topic and something that every small business owner is going to face. And, last week we discussed kind of the different things that you need to really consider for growth and success and longevity and transfer, right? And one of those points we touched on, but we didn't get deep into, which we'd like to today, is people.
Yeah, and I think a good place to start is like Gino Wickman does in EOS is right people in the right seats.
Yeah, right butt, right seat, right?
Yeah. So it starts with identifying and hiring, but then it also goes through training, maintaining, and retaining.
Yeah,
so there's a lot to it.
And I think there's a experience of mine has been, it's easier to find good people than necessarily find the perfect butt for the perfect seat, and in small business. And so like you're out looking for that perfect fit, and I call it the unicorn. And unicorns are hard to find and hire, but I think something every small business owner needs to keep in mind as they scale. You may have that great person doing, multiple things. And the goal in my eyes has always been to get that person to do what they do best as often as they can do it. And that means that as you scale, you're not adding the responsibility to them, you're removing responsibility from them. Because, face it, if you've got one employee or two employees, those two employees got to be able to do a lot of different things.
Yeah. So it's
like a refinement.
Yeah,
right?
It's you when you start.
Yes.
But then it changes. So the skill that you're looking for isn't necessarily marketing, accounting. It's something a little bit more general, like problem solving or
stick to
innovation or grit or those are the skills that you're looking for. And because you get a great accountant that can solve problems, they're not going to be doing your numbers forever. They've got to move into a different role.
Yeah. And I've taken a different approach than a lot of companies out there, which I think is interesting. I'll share. I've found that when you hire experience, you get experience. And with that experience is not necessarily the innovation. It's oftentimes the experience that they previously had is brought into the ship that is, operating on a different fuel system or whatever the case may be, right? And so I like to do a lot of opportunity-based hiring, right? Where and again, I think this is a small business thing as opposed to a large business thing, because I don't always have the job description laid out to be exactly what they're going to do. I've got a broad base. I've got a pretty good job description, but there's crossover. So I like to hire someone that has that problem solving skill. And I like to put them in a position where I can push them and I can let them grow their experience through not me telling them this is how I want it done or this is what it's supposed to be. Here's what I want the end result to be. Why don't you tell me how to get there and try and figure that piece out? So I think that problem solving piece is huge.
Yeah, I think we struggle both in small business and in the corporate level. We have the same problem, whereas you bring someone in for a specific role and good or not, they advance. And the next step along the trail isn't necessarily the same skills. So, and it's not transferable. So how many times have you seen your best salesman? And this happened to me. I was, winning every battle in sales. I got promoted to being a sales manager and I sucked at it.
Yeah.
But I was never trained. I was never told. I didn't know what I was doing. So, so luckily I had the opportunity to back off, and about 8 years later, I was offered the same job, and okay, now I know how to do it. So I think, if in whatever your small business is, if you start teaching the business to your employees, letting them learn, bring them in the inner circle, then they're more prepared for that next spot, whether it's management, it's innovation, it's expansion, it's duplication. You know, there's a ton of different ways to do it. But it's not doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And I think that there's an interesting concept that I've always kind of relied on, which is you have your operators and you have your managers, right? And and it doesn't mean an operator can't become a manager or a manager can't be an operator. It means that they're not the same thing, right? And so a great example is having a young sales producer, right? Or a great young accountant that then has to lead a team of accountants and manage the workloads and manage the balance and the HR responsibilities and all that stuff. And if you don't have I don't know if it's training or exposure, I think is the bigger thing. If you don't have the exposure and leadership or guidance on it, it can be a tough thing for that individual to transition in management, right? Because I always try and break it down to, you can be a manager in my outfit. You either manage a process or you manage people, and they're not always interrelated, and sometimes they are. So I can have people that manage process. Hey, you own this process. Your job is to make sure this process is followed. That's a management responsibility. But that may not come with 3 people that all do that process that you have to manage. It may just be the process itself. Then there's another level that I put on, which is now you manage the process and the people. And so that's kind of how I've looked at giving managerial responsibility, right? So I can have a process that needs completed every day, and it can be a one-man job. Well, you're managing that process. You own that process. Some people would call it your job, right? But I look at it in terms of, when you own a process, it's also your responsibility to improve that process, to refine that process, to put the standard process on paper, to make sure that someone else could be trained on that process. So it's a management responsibility in its own right, but it's different than managing people, right?
But how often does it come up, though, that someone is so good at their job, whatever it is, managing a process, sales, marketing, whatever, that you just leave them alone? And you're not spending any time saying, okay, where's the future for this person? Because, face it, one of the underlying human requirements is growth.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to get better. So you, as the entrepreneur, the manager, or whatever, you're running this business, you have to be identifying that and prepare for it. And then you can bring in new talent. So you come be the best marketer in the world. If you can't quantify that process and then teach it to someone else, then we can't move you up to the next level.
Yeah. And I think that is probably the hardest thing to overcome in small business. Because, you've got this rock star in this particular role, and there are no problems. There are no issues. That role is just iron tight.
Yeah, so you don't want to mess with it.
Yeah, but you have to.
Yeah.
And I always talk about in our company, right? If I'm doing the same thing tomorrow that I did yesterday, then everybody in the company is stagnant. There's no upward mobility. There's no growth. There's no expansion. So I need to be charting new territory so that the people behind me, and I'm lifting while I'm climbing, of course, I have to present them opportunities to do it. And I think, there is also this concept, the cream will rise to the top, and the people that accept challenges and beat them will do it again.
Yeah, I think the scary part of it is, I think they will rise to the top, but if that opportunity is not within your company, they'll rise to the top of another organization.
Absolutely.
So in the sports world, we see this all the time.
Yep.
Someone becomes a really good coach. There's nowhere to go. A competitor looks at him and says, I could use them, and can make it attractive moving forward. We also see another good lesson from sports is that you can be really good at something. You can be the best, I'll use baseball because I know it a little bit, but be the best hitter, there is. Doesn't necessarily make you the best hitting coach.
100%.
So, sometimes things come too easy. And if you're the best salesman, doesn't mean you're the best sales manager.
Or trainer, or
whatever it is.
And I think that's a great segue into that kind of promotion concept of people too. You can promote someone and have a completely diminishing return. And that the idea that the best salesman, if you can't train other salespeople and can't manage them effectively and can't bring them up, then you're going to have a lack of sales across the board. The training, and I think that's a big deal in hiring managers and promoting managers and people that are in control positions. They have to be able to train.
Yeah. So then they have to be able to train, athletes, but they also have to be able to train the coaches. So what you're looking for is the application of the compound effect. We talk about the compound effect in everything you do. It's this pyramid system that, I'm going to train two that are going to train two each. And, all of a sudden I'm responsible for 16 people and it continues to grow. But if you're not to the point where you can do that, so I think as early as you can, you have to identify that and say, okay, let's watch this person. And sometimes great trainers and teachers are what they are because someone said, watch that person.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know they're doing it, but you learn from them.
Yeah. I think the other part of the training aspect is it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Meaning if you train someone effectively, you're essentially training them for your job, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so you better have the next level to go. And I remember a piece of advice I was given, which I thought was the dumbest thing that was ever said to me, was job security is never teaching somebody everything you know. And I think that's just the antithesis of growth, right? In a growth mindset and a growth focused business, you want to teach the person next to you and below you everything you can so that you can step up to the next position or the next growth model or take a risk doing something else because you know that it's handled. This goes back to the conversation we had last week, Steve, which was when was the last time you were able to take a 2-week vacation?
Yeah.
Right. If you don't train people effectively, you'll never take that 2-week vacation. I had a consultation yesterday with a client on the business consulting side, and he's considering a merger with another, and it's a small tech company, considering a merger with another tech company. And he's concerned about a lot of things, as he should be in the merger. And I said, the first thing you have to understand when you go into a partnership arrangement or you go into multiple leaders, like whose responsibility is what, and how are you going to deal with situations as they arise? And in talking about that, the merger deal, you're now stepping into managing a team of people. You're stepping into a different mechanism altogether, and it has to be focused on growth, right? What's the purpose of doing it if it's not growth? And you got to constantly kind of reinvent yourself moving forward. Yeah.
And as long as you're absolutely needed in that business, the value of the business is lower. So we talked about that last week.
Well, my point to him was I used your quote and said, when was the last time you were able to take a 2-week vacation?
Yeah.
I said, so you're self-employed.
Yeah.
If you're going to merge with someone else who's either bigger or equal to size, should double and create a growth model for you, right? The goal should be to take that 2-week vacation.
So let's shift a bit here and talk about another people issue is when you're going into business or you're in business or you want to scale, where do you go for your partnerships, your stakeholders in your business? And I think too often, and I find this in the sports world a lot, two great coaches get together and say, we should open our own business. They're both coaching for some other organization. They decide to start their own business. The problem is their skills are identical. And as hard as it is, you need synergy. You need two compatible skills, but not exactly the same skills. So finding that person to go in business with is difficult. And it's one reason why there's a lot of times family businesses are really difficult.
Yeah. So my first partnership we were very similar, but it was a sales organization.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, we were like, all right, well, we can light the world on fire with sales. And we had to develop a service department. And so my responsibility came that development of the service department and customer service and all that. My partner's, Matt's position at that time was really to lead the company and take that vision. When we went to scale and we joined forces with John, my attraction to the whole thing was that John's skill set was 180 from mine.
Mm-hmm.
The way he processes, the way he decides, the way he makes his decisions, everything was the opposite of how I do it. So it was a complete synergistic match, because all of the things that I despised, going through the books, doing the accounting, making sure that worrying about all that stuff is his bread and butter.
Yeah.
Mine is going out and leading a company and designing. And so what we got to was a CEO, COO, and CFO.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm the CEO. I get to go make the decisions about vision and use my ability to speak to motivate and guide. Matt then is tasked with, okay, here's the plan. Now we got to put it in motion. Everybody has to do their role, and we have to lubricate the systems and the processes together. John is now managing all of the finance for all of the companies, making sure that our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and that we have the funding in position to follow through on the vision and the mission. So I think there's a real step back, because and it's not simply the subset of skills that each have and bring to the table. When you're dealing with someone who does things different than you and looks at things through a different lens, it can be a frustration point
Mm-hmm.
too. So, John and I, we would butt heads at times, but it was always a conversation and cool heads prevail. And we look at the facts of the situation and make the decision. But sometimes that can lead to friction that people can't understand. And that leads me to my last point. If you are going to join and do partnerships and you're going to do that, speak early and often about conflict resolution.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up, because a book that we reference frequently is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And the avoidance of conflict is one of those things. And it's a big problem, because to avoid a conflict or what is referred to as a sweaty palm conversation is to allow it to exist and manifest itself, and it's just dragging you down.
Yep.
So the sooner you can get to it, and I've been blessed with the ability to create conflict and voice conflict without. It's almost like I like it. It's like I'm a serial debater. I love debates, and I'll take either side right now. But let's talk this out. And I think if you avoid those things, so you have two people in your sales department or marketing department that are avoiding a conflict, you're avoiding progression.
Yep. And there is healthy, positive conflict, and then there's the alternative. And I would always go for healthy, positive conflict and keep it, above the belt.
Mm-hmm.
Is
well, it's not personal. You're discussing, the facts of the business and your opinions of them, and you can differ, but you have to discuss them. You have to get them out in the open.
Yeah, and in small business, sometimes it does feel personal. Mm-hmm. And so you can't let that ego in that conversation. You have to fight that, because I know when there's a disagreement of how something should be done, everybody wants to draw the line in the sand and say, this is what the way we need to do it. So you have to really, put the knives on the table, take and do it with radical candor is another concept that we use a lot in our organization. That is, don't beat around the bush. If you disagree, but disagree with a point and a solution on your side. And then let's discuss the solutions that are laid out. Right.
So, which leads into another people topic, which is positions, titles, and org charts. And I'm not sure I like any of them, but you have to have some operating procedure. I've always had a negative feeling towards the word boss.
Mm-hmm.
Because boss means that, you're the boss, you're the only one that has the right to an opinion. And I think if you get your organization thinking that way, where they're, either afraid to voice an opinion or just withholding it, then you're probably missing out on a lot of innovation, a lot of good ideas. So I've never liked it when I was reporting to a boss or when I was the boss. I'm not fond of it in either case.
No, I always tell my staff that I'm the decision maker, which is a difference. At the end of the day, if I want to make a decision a certain way, I'm going to make that decision. We're going to follow through on it. But for me to make a decision, I need your ideas presented. I need your thoughts presented. And then I need to make a decision on what we're going to do. And sometimes it won't be the decision you want to hear. Sometimes it's not going to be the right decision. I'm going to make as many mistakes in business as anybody else. And I think I was watching a cool little reel the other day on Instagram, and it was about coaching. And it was this coach who was, I want to say it was an NFL player. Forget the name, but it's beside the point. And he said from very early age, when he would coach his teams, he would before they started the game, he would say, who's going to make a mistake today? And none of the kids would raise his hand, and he would put his hand up and say, I'm a coach and I'm going to make a mistake today. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to make a mistake today. And I apologize for the mistake. By the end, everybody was willing to make mistakes and fail. And he said, that's the importance of understanding. You can fail and pick yourself back up, and you can make mistakes. And I think that that's another thing in business, that people are afraid to make mistakes. And especially if you put that boss environment in, they don't want to do anything that jeopardizes that relationship. And if you go back to the old movie Office Space, right? People will do enough to just not get fired.
Yeah.
If you'll allow them. And if you stifle somebody's innovation, thoughts, or opinions, that's what's going to happen. They're going to do enough to appease you, and you're never going to identify that they're either a weak link or a great player.
Yeah, if you get someone to that point where they're comfortable and they're not anxious to move up, but they're just trying to avoid moving back. It's the old good enough isn't ever good enough.
No.
So, but yeah, I think that there's a lot of times when you have to, take the chances. I think the best boss, the best coach, the best NFL baseball manager, whatever it is, takes none of the credit and all of the responsibility. And I think that's the way in business. And it's easy to get there in an entrepreneurial world because it is your business, it's your money, it's your decisions. Yeah. So the mistakes are all yours too. And no matter where they were actually committed, it's your fault.
It's funny we say that, because one of my strategies for managing has always been at times to not make a decision for people.
Yeah.
And, they'll ask me and they'll give me this list of stuff, and I'll next. And it's essentially, you make the call and you do it, right? If you believe that's the way to go, let's go. I'm not going to fight you on it. Unless I strongly disagree, right? You're going to be forced to make and own that decision.
By the time I stepped down from being the national sales manager, I had a pretty advanced, experienced sales team. And my, instructions to them was, you can come to me with any problem you want, as long as you bring the answer with it. And, I'll be the one to nod off on it. I'll take responsibility, but you tell me what the answer is.
Yeah.
And it gives them a little bit more autonomy in their job. And I think that's what people, what you're trying to do is you get people enough autonomy that they feel responsible for what they're doing. So it's all, and we can do, so 2 more podcasts that we have to, work into the mix. One is on firing, which, we avoided that. The other is training and scaling and the need for improvement along the line. And what do you do to set up a training process? But part of it is giving them autonomy and responsibility.
Yeah. And as a human condition, we all strive for autonomy. That's just a nature of being human. Everybody wants it. And so you either embrace it and support it, or you fight it and you stagnate, right? I mean, that's the reality.
In one of his books, I forget which book, but Dan Pink, who's, one of my favorite kind of heady type authors, So there's a study out there somewhere that says people will take autonomy over financial raise. If you give them the option, they're going to take the autonomy. They want control.
Yep.
And if you give them control and they're responsible for it, they're going to make it work, and they're eventually going to do more for you, and they'll earn the more money.
Yeah. And I think that's a segue into pressure as well. And pressure is good, stress is bad, right? But they say that stress is pressure that's not dealt with, right? That's the reality. And so I do apply pressure. There's no question on everyone. I apply pressure. But I don't apply pressure if I don't believe the outcome is they can handle that pressure, right? So I think as a coach, as a motivator, as a leader, pressure is necessary, right? If you're and pressure can just be a deadline. It can be a goal. Pressure can be applied in a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be like the gauntlet micromanagement pressure, right? But we also, as a human condition, have a desire to please, right? So the right goal set is pressure in its own right.
So another podcast is like all the soft skills that are needed to grow. And if you grow people in the soft skills, the hardwired skills of an accountant or a marketing, how to write an ad, how to lay out a paper, how to, all those hard skills, they will be learned. Soft skills have to be taught. And there's a big difference between learning and, to learn, you have to give them the opportunity to learn. To teach them, someone has to point things out. And I think, we've talked about relentless solution focus. That's a soft skill that has a ton of application in everyone's job. So I think we have to think about how we're training and what we're training. And the old idea of learning without being taught is kind of what everybody wants. And in today's world with YouTube and LinkedIn Learning and all these things, there's a lot of ways to do that, but you have to foster it within your business and in every business.
Yeah. There was a pyramid that diagram that I was shown. And I sometimes I come up on these things and I can't remember where along the way I got it, but it was talking about the value of an employee to a leader. And, there was level 1 through level 5 on this pyramid, level 5 being the top, level 1 being the bottom. And a level 1 employee can tell you there's a problem. A level 2 employee can tell you there's a problem and we've identified where it is. A level 3 can tell you there's a problem, we've identified it, here's a potential solution. A level 4 identifies it, knows where it is, gives you the 3 best solutions to answer it. And a level 5 tells you, hey, there was a problem, we fixed it.
Yeah.
Right. And that is what everybody is trying to progress in their business. The person that can come to the table and say, hey, there was this problem, we fixed it, it's handled, you don't have to worry about it. Right.
And the only caveat is the person that, and I had one of these on my staff at AI, was so good at solving problems that I never heard about them. So I never fixed the root cause to the problems because he was solving them on the fly. So whether, it's like if someone corrects your spelling in some email you're sending out every time and you never learn how to spell that word, that's oversimplification. But that's the idea. Everybody has to be aware of the problems.
Yep. And that's another thing that leads to, I think, people, and part of the people situation is integrity, right? I have to remember that as an entrepreneur, your people are trying to please, satisfy, and you are that boss, whether you call it a boss or not. You are the leader. And so sometimes people mess up and they want to call it a cover up or call it just solve the problem and move on. And I think the type of leader you are depends on whether people really do a cover up job or whether they identify it, tell you, and also the type of person they are at the same time.
I again, the warning is don't confuse leadership with management. So they're very, very different. your leadership doesn't have to be your most vocal person. The leadership leads by example. It's like Simon Sinek, he's great. Leaders eat last, and it's leaders lead by example more than anything else. So we've identified at least 12 other podcasts that we can talk about on the people segment. And that's just one segment of the EOS system is, we started out with, right butts and right seats, but all these little things fit in there.
And we didn't even tap into recruiting or hiring. I mean, firing and replacing and downsizing or upsizing, scaling out.
So pick one for next week. Which one do you want to go into?
I think recruiting. Let's start at the beginning, right?
Okay.
Where you find people, how you do it, and how you go after it. And that'll be a great conversation because it's different for all walks of life, but it's very similar no matter what you're trying to recruit.
So our man Niall over there, I want to get his name in the podcast here, just so someone knows. So someone knows who's running the show here. And now your responsibility is to remind us what we're talking about next week.
Perfect. All right, everybody. It's Paradigm Playbook. Thank you.
Make it a great week.